Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about the election of 1912, which in many respects one could call the War of 1912. There has never been an election like it. I'm hoping that there never will be. It was a most remarkable time. It was a rather frightening time as well, because the electoral process was put on its heels by the antics of three individuals. We had three people running for president in 1912. And it's very unique because one of them was president, one of them had been president, and one of them would be president. You had Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. What a remarkable combination of individuals. And it was ugly. It was nasty. The mudraking, the innuendo, the nasty things said were nothing short of incredible. And the only thing that comes even close to this, I guess one would say, would be the election of 1824 and the Democratic Convention in Chicago of 1968. Think about how awful that was. But the election of 1912 brought three titans together. It was the battle of the titans, one might say. You had Theodore Roosevelt, who, as Harry S. Truman used to say, was more bull than moose. He was a brilliant individual, great writer, great thinker. As Oliver Wendell Holmes once said of him, first-rate personality, second-rate intellect. I'm paraphrasing. He said it slightly differently. You had Woodrow Wilson, who was the president of president of Princeton University, and had later been governor of New Jersey. And you had William Howard Taft, who had been many things. He, of course, had been Secretary of War most recently. He had been the military governor of the Philippines and been very, very successful in his work. And he was more of a jurist than anything else, and he would love to have been Chief Justice. That was his dream. And you had these three getting together. They didn't agree on much of anything. Well, I have to say this way. Let's put it this way. Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson did agree on many things. They were both progressives. The problem was with this. Theodore Roosevelt had been president. He had finished out McKinley's term, which was almost the entire term, and then had won a term in his own right, and had announced that he would not run for re-election. He himself said he would have bitten off that hand for having said that, but he was true to his word, and pushed Taft along to become president. Now, what he wanted Taft to do was to basically follow his ideals, his administration. Now, that's pretty arrogant, if I may say so. He wanted Taft to just be an extension of himself. Well, Taft was very different, and Teddy Roosevelt didn't like it. Woodrow Wilson? Well, he was somewhat of a dry stick. I guess that's about the only way to describe him. He was progressive. He was very racist, very much against anything dealing with African Americans. It was really kind of frightening. And in this entire gathering of these titans, as they socked it out, it got very ugly. The Republican convention was ugly. There were physical fights on the convention floor. People were beating each other. There were fights taking out here, there, and everywhere. People were clubbing each other. They were punching each other. There was blood on the floor of the convention. In fact, eventually what would happen is that Teddy Roosevelt tried to take over the Republican convention, which basically was for Taft. And what he would do, like a spoiled brat, he would lead his people out of the convention and become part of the progressive movement, which they eventually called the Bull Moose Party. And you had 3 people running for office. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to let you hear a recording of each of the candidates in 1912, and you can listen to them, come to your own views. But I have to say that I, for one, having studied this for so many years, I find that Theodore Roosevelt should have been smarter. He wasn't always the smartest. He was impulsive. And perhaps Oliver Wendell Holmes was very correct in his estimation of Theodore Roosevelt, that he had a great personality, but he didn't totally have the intellect to follow it. William Howard Taft was a great intellect. He didn't have the personality. Woodrow Wilson had an intellect. He was a historian. Historians never should be president. He didn't have much of a personality either. He did have a personality when he was alone, because he liked to dance for his family. William Howard Taft was a big man. He was 350 pounds. And he made a fool of himself several times. He loved to play golf. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Don't let them film you playing golf." Well, he did. Theodore Roosevelt was the best showman. He was a bit of a drama queen. About the best way to describe Theodore Roosevelt. Especially when you get to the 1912 election, he gets nasty. He calls William Howard Taft a fat slob. He called Woodrow Wilson something less than a man. These are not nice things to say, especially when you're running for office. So we're going to be listening to recordings of all of the 3. And let me give you some examples. We'll be listening to a cylinder recording. See if I can do this. Can you see that? Okay. This is Theodore Roosevelt. I'm trying to see. There we are. Theodore Roosevelt. We will be listening to William Howard Taft. Hopefully that's readable. And we will be listening to also Woodrow Wilson. And we will basically give you a little earshot of the 1912 election. Arguably the ugliest election in the history of the American electorate.